Salve amici, welcome back to Viva Latina and welcome to our Latin literature review. In these review videos, we will give you a great way to excel at the regional forum test and provide a great resource to make your fundamentals ready for the state forum test. So in our first video, we're going to start out with Livius Andronicus and then we're going to go all the way down to Lucretius. So without any further ado, let's begin. Let me zoom in a little bit. So, background of Livius Andronicus. Livius Andronicus is considered the founder of Latin literature. He was actually a Greek origin. He was born in Tarentum around 284 BC. Again, dates in Latin literature aren't that important, but it's really good to know your dates so you can organize Latin literature as it starts from the beginning to the end. He was brought to Rome as a slave, and this is what he did as a contributor to Latin literature. He translated the Odyssey of the Greek poet Homer into Latin. Next, he rendered in poetry in the Saturnian verse. He also authored Fabulae, Palliatae. These are Latin comedies which are derived from Greek originals. So that was Livius Andronicus, the founder of Latin literature. Now let's go to Gnaeus Naevius. Gnaeus Naevius was the first Roman author of Roman origin. He was born around 270 BCE. He was best known for his Bellum Punicum. This was an epic poem on the First Punic War, also in the Saturnian verse. He invented the Fabulae, Praetextae. These are dramas based on Roman subjects named for the garment, the praetexta. He also, just like Livius Andronicus, wrote Fabulae Palliatae. So while we go through these notes, make sure you have a good way to form a comparison between authors. Some of these authors in the earlier times are much more similar together than the other authors. So now let's move on to Quintus Ennius. Ennius, a writer of plays and poems, born in Rudia in Calabria in 239 BCE. He was proficient in 3 languages. These languages were Latin, Greek, and Oscan. That is why he was referred to having 3 hearts due to his knowledge of languages, 1 heart for each language. He was revered by later writers more than Livius and Naevius. So due to Ennius, many of the earlier writers were kind of overshadowed. His most important work was the Annales. It was an epic poem, 18 books long. Now, this is the most important part of Ennius, which you should know. He wrote it in dactylic hexameter verse. And this narrates the Rome story from the fall of Troy all the way to Ennius's time. This makes Ennius the first writer to adapt Greek hexameter verse into Latin. So this dactylic hexameter was coined and championed by Ennius. Next, we have Titus Macius Plautus, or just Plautus. He was a comic playwright, born in 255 BC. He wrote around 130 plays, but we only have 20 which are fully extant, and a large form of one more, which is called, let me zoom in a little bit, Vidularia. He derived his plays from those of Greek. So these were Latin plays, but they were kind of related to other Greek plays. Let's look at some of his notable plays, which are really important to know. His first one on the list is Amphitryon. Amphitryon concerns Jupiter's love for Alcmena, the wife of Amphitryon. Next, he wrote Alularia, which means the pot of gold. He wrote Captivi, which means the captives. It was concerning a man named Hegio, searching for his lost sons, and it has no female characters. That is really important to know. Then, we have Epictetus, Plautus's favorite play. Then we have Menechmi, a real classic. This was Plautus's one of his most successful comedies. It's about two separated brothers discover each other and are reunited in Syracuse and the city of their births. This play is the model for Shakespeare's I spelled that right? Yep, Shakespeare's A Comedy of Errors. Again, another play which he wrote was Miles Gloriosus, which translates into the braggart soldier. We have Mostellaria, which is the haunted house. We have Poenulus, which means the Carthaginian. And it's really important to know Poenulus because it contains the only extant passages of Carthaginian language. In the play, Hanno prevents his daughters from being sold into prostitution. Now we have Pseudolus. This was a play in which the title character helps his master obtain money to free a courtesan named Phoenicium from Simo, who was the procurer, and a Macedonian officer who almost buys her. That is another classic play to know of for Plautus. And then we have Rudens, meaning rope. That was another play, but it's not as popular as the other ones. Now let's move on to Cato the Elder. Cato the Elder, or Marcus Porcius Cato the Elder, or Cato the Censor, was born in Tusculum in 234 BC. He fought in the famous Second Punic War, and he is famous for ending all of his speeches with Carthago delenda est, which translates into Carthage must be destroyed. And he died in 144 BC. Here's some of his contributions. He was Rome's first prose writer, and he was the first to write Roman history in Latin. He wrote the Origines, a lost work in around 7 books, dealing with the beginnings of Italian civilization and early Roman history. The only name mentioned in the Origines was the name of the lone elephant of Hannibal that survived the trek over the Alps. Now we have De Agricultura or De Re Rustica. This is Cato's second work. This was a handbook on agriculture. In this book, he declares cabbage to be an excellent and versatile crop. This is the first surviving Latin prose work. And Origenes was the first history written in Latin. So one common theme which we see in the beginnings of all of these authors is they're the first people to write a certain type of work in Latin. Next we have Publius Terentius Afer, or Terence. He was a comic playwright born in Carthage. Taken to Rome as a slave by Terentius Lucanus, he educated him and eventually was freed by Terentius Lucanus, and he took his benefactor's name. So again, we have Terence, and we can see the relationship with Terentius. He became friends with Scipio Aemilianus. That was, when you later learn, he was a really big patron for all these authors. And he wrote 6 plays, all of which are extant. However, he died during a trip to Athens in 159 BC. Notable plays. Remember, all of these plays are set in Athens. There's Andria, which is the woman of Andros, Hecaira, which is the mother-in-law. Now this is a big one. It's Heoton Timaromenos, which is the self-tormentor. We have Euncus, which means the Aench. We have Phormio, and we have Adelphi, which means the brothers. That ends Terence. Now let's move on to Titus Lucretius Carus, or Lucretius. He was a Roman poet born around 99 BC in Rome. He was the follower of, here, let me zoom in, Epicurean philosophy. According to Saint Jerome, he took a love potion that made him insane, and he committed suicide when he was 44 years old in 55 BC. Lucretius's only surviving work is the De Rerum Natura, which translates into On the Nature of Things. This is an unfinished didactic epic poem addressed to his friend Gaius Memmius, the governor of Bithynia. And this poem is also 6 books long. So with that being said, we just went through the major early authors of Latin literature. In the next video, we're going to address one of the greatest authors, Cicero, and we'll continue on through this regional study guide. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching and following, and can't wait to see you in the next video.